So, guys, who are we talking about for our next piece? Which company?
So for our next piece, we're going with a sector rather than a company. We're going to cover Indian media companies, and the reason we chose to go with this is, of course, the news of a Sony Zee merger being in the works. That got us wondering about whether we've done a piece dedicated to media before, and turns out we hadn't. And of course, like the main question right now is what counts as a media company, right? Like, what is media? It kind of gives us the opportunity to like put out our thoughts about what media is as of today, and even like with the changing definitions given organizations that currently qualify as media as per the archaic definition. They're very ad revenue driven, right? Like print media players in India derive like north of 2/3 of their revenue from ads. We all know about Facebook and everything, what happened with Snap a couple of days back. So a little bit of that, and honestly, like the scope of Indian media is mind blowing when you think about the fact that it reaches almost a seventh of all humanity, right? So the scope is incredible. The journey has been incredible. So I think it was a good time for us to think about it.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's really interesting. The definition of what is media is quite different, right? It's not news media that our parents used to consume. I think people consume news media less and less.
Right.
Parts, I mean, what have your experiences been with this? I mean, I know you had a few.
Yeah, so I'll just take as in my experience with the entire media piece. So that can be broken down into two pieces. One is before the social media or before, let's say, the Facebook family. And post, let's say, after 2008, 2010, after the Facebook went viral. So I'm not counting Orkut per se. So Orkut, I do not consider as a media. Orkut was more for a socializing. So we have social media and the traditional media. So traditional media still exists. So traditional media, if you consider the India's perspective, it's basically FM. So basically the radio. Radio also has two parts. One is the private entity and a public entity, which is Doordarshan. Not the Doordarshan, the Prasar Bharati. And then we have the print media. Print media is people still believe in print media, at least in India, in the regional languages. But I'm not sure about the content, as in how good the content is. And then you have the visual media, which is the television. So if you and then again the social media had a huge impact. So if you just talk about numbers, and I still feel the Facebook has the benchmark over here, as in if you have something which is done by Facebook, and if you can exceed that kind of an expectation, then from the investor's perspective, I think that's pretty much amazing. So if you just talk about Facebook, and then I'll talk about some of the the successful media entities which I consider. In short, ho gaya ya print ho gaya. So if you just talk about Facebook, generally the metric which they consider is DAU by MAU, which is how many people actively scout for your content. Now Facebook, so if you just talk about Facebook will give you, now how do I put it? Whether there's a term or no, I don't know, but Facebook will give you only content which your friends and family is basically posting, your connection is posting.
And there's no sort of verification of like facts.
No sort of they claim there is a verification. Zuckerberg already testified in front of Congress, but I'm not sure, as in.
I mean, it's sort of this trade-off, right? You have Facebook, which is more relevant, but less.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then you have the other entities, for example, LinkedIn ho gaya, Twitter, or the Instagram. So that follows your interest. Snap ho gaya. So that basically follows your interest. So you can actually follow the hashtags, etc. So those two are kind of an entity. And Facebook is more like in the benchmark figure. Facebook still has, only the Facebook still claims they have 60-70%. More than 65% DAU by MAU metrics. And the entire family has close to like 80%, and they have been consistent. And if you just consider InShorts kind of an entity, so they have close to 50-55% DAU by MAU conversion. So just talk about numbers. People are still interested in this kind of an content consumption. But long form content consumption, I think people are not interested, and which is very relevant or which is very prominent if you just talk about the news channels or just listening to the FM, the traditional FM, Prasar Bharati or Doordarshan, whatever we consider. Yeah. So I think people are interested in consuming the content, but because of the attention span, because of the entire social media, I think people are now shifting towards fatafat, if I can just consume the content faster in a shorter format. Yeah. So I think that's one aspect of the entire media consumption and the media ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, our attention spans have shrunk. And at the same time, we're looking for like more and more specific content. And I think one of the things in India that's fascinating is, you've seen this sort of rise almost of vernacular media and different content, regional content essentially. I'm curious, do you guys have any thoughts on the economics behind it and how it's evolved, regional content in India?
So I can just talk about some advertising numbers. As in, again, that's India per se. A lot of numbers are not that great, as in we cannot just trust. But yeah, this is broad understanding. So historically, across the globe, radio still accounts for like 7 to 8% of the advertisers' expenditure. But in India, it is less than like 1.5 to 2%.
Radio specifically.
Radio specifically. But if you have something like cricket, then I think it just goes over the roof. It
so
just goes over the roof.
It's not audio. Audio as a content format is still widely used.
Yeah. And same is the case with the Clubhouse. The Clubhouse is a classic example. It went viral for a couple of months. Pretty much dead afterwards.
And I mean, like, I believe the stat is only 10% of Indians speak English, and there's so many regional languages. I mean, Shelly, how do you see it evolving? I mean, I know a lot of content platforms, Netflix being one, has produced a lot of regional content. What are some of the trends you're seeing in vernacular content, and how do you see it evolving?
So, Mazen, in the recent years, with the penetration of mobile and internet in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, and otherwise also, people are coming from various backgrounds who want to watch content in their own language. So let's say all these apps like ShareChat, Moj, Trell, they are producing content in vernacular languages. Even before we go to vernacular languages, I think one thing that we need to see is that how is the content evolving. So let's say back in 2016, Facebook had launched its live feature in India, which gave the users access to create content on their own, like live stream whatever event was happening around them. Around the same time, TikTok had come. So I covered from let's say 2016, from where we sort of started moving towards content being created by these viewers. Until before that, we were just watching content on TV or YouTube or Facebook and Instagram. Then we started creating this content. So there are parts to it, like Netflix. It is having regional content now, and the reasons for, like, if we talk about the economics, creating content regionally or locally is much cheaper than creating content in a foreign country and then selling it in India, let's say. So Netflix is focusing on this type of content. Similarly for Hotstar and Amazon Prime and all other big players in OTT.
I mean, we've spoken a lot about Netflix and Facebook and TikTok and all these international brands essentially evolving the way that we create content. We previously had organizations create content. Now we have individuals creating content. What are some Indian startups that are, doing something in this space?
So, interestingly, I was checking the market shares for these OTT platforms, and Eros now stands on the second number after Hotstar, and after that, Netflix and Amazon Prime come. So there is Alt Balaji also, which is an OTT platform. Then there are these hyper shorts platform, where like vlogging platform like Trell. So Trell helps vloggers record videos and publish it to their subscribers. And then they also start now this vlogging content is also linked to social commerce. So let's say Glow Road or a Meesho would benefit from these local influencers who are reaching out to their audience in different cities. And now after consumption, the next step is basically converting them from consumption to subscription or transaction.
Yeah, so I mean, and you mentioned Hotstar as well. To me, that's another huge aspect of media that we've touched on a bit. How big is sports for media in India? I mean, what does that segment look like?
So I am not really sure about the right numbers, but Hotstar did have a sudden spike in their subscribers when they started streaming IPL back in 2019 or 20, I think. So I'm not really sure about the numbers.
But I mean, clearly, like we all know that that's been a huge boom, and I mean, it's something that again is shifting, right? I mean, you're seeing typically you'd watch sports on your TV. Now you have OTTs streaming it live, and so you're seeing that shift not just in terms of content, but also in terms of sports.
So it's also related to like how these platforms are trying to gain subscribers, right? For example, Hotstar is bringing in value through bringing live sports streaming. Amazon Prime has launched its inbuilt app. Like you can subscribe to Hulu or HBO within Amazon for an added price within your subscription. So these are some of the models that they are exploring, apart from partnering with the local content producers.
Yeah, so kind of bringing in new platforms and synergies between these platforms. And that's one of the things, I mean, I feel like it's such a fragmented market. You have so many different OTTs and so many different options.
So many like the target audience is huge. So now how do you cater to them, and how do you build at a where do you break even basically, and where do you start producing good numbers?
So curious about the history, you know, of media and TVs. And I believe TVs were initially sold to get people more interested in politics in India.
Yeah. Even religious shows like Ramayan, people used to, whenever people were traveling, they used to stop at a maybe a chai wala shop or somewhere where there is a TV, and people used to watch it, and then only then they would continue their journey. So that is how it started with Ramayan and Mahabharata and
right. And even like so DTH, right? The government was planning on introducing it in around 1996, but there were a couple of reasons why people were pushing back. They were like, no, this is a bad cultural influence on our society. They had to wait out like another 4 years till like the year 2000, and finally that's when it all happened. So a lot of
media would be a bad influence. Is that what it was?
Right. I think in the end, media is how it's a mirror, right, to our society, and the way that our government thinks about it is a lot of it's a very interesting and very dangerous line to tread, but it is a very interesting thing about it.
No, that's a fascinating thought of media being a mirror into our society. I mean, it's you're almost like, especially now when you have more and more people who can create content and more people can put stuff out there. It tells you a lot about the way the country is evolving, what priorities people have, what people are focusing on.
Right. Right. And like pre-independence, right? Like the culture associated with mass media was very different. Like nearly like a third of the founding members of the Indian National Congress were journalists, and all major political leaders had their own newspaper or were contributing their writings to a couple of them. So slowly, like we moved from print media, we after independence we had the Press Trust of India set up, and once we had FM radio and Doordarshan and everything, the stronghold of the state was very present, and media was not really a business. Like obviously it was more of a public service, right? Like journalists were paid next to nothing for their work, and suddenly, like, although I think I won't say that liberalization was a sudden thing, right? There are often more debates about how that happened, when that happened, was that a mistake or like some genius decision, but it happened. And 1991 was not like one dot moment where everything changed, but once it did come in, right, like once media became a business, a lot of stuff changed very drastically, and I mean, you can see that in the numbers, right? The profits are increasing like exponentially ever since. So really makes us think about what we are consuming, how we're consuming it. Like, it's not a one to many. Again, it's like a many to many now. Everyone's open to there is some freedom of press, I would say. A lot of people would debate me on this, but not fully free. But yeah, it is how it is. But a lot of I think for me the most important thing is seeing it all change, right? Like this one piece where you have to make a timeline and you see how it started and where it is right now. You're just like, what went wrong? What just happened? But a lot of different thoughts about it.
And it's amazing. I mean, you think about news as a public service, and I think that's how it's evolved in most countries. So now what we have today, which is content powered by data, essentially, and a totally different world. What are some of the challenges that media companies face? I mean, especially
when you talk about specific challenges, so first is basically the capturing data, like the Google and the Facebooks, the world do, and I don't think the analysis the traditional media companies, or they have that kind of an infrastructure to capture those kind of a data, and so the kind of value which they provide to the advertisers is basically missing. So if you just compare, let's say, Twitter versus the FM radio, or the speed at which they can disseminate any kind of an information. So I think these are the two things. First is capturing the data, providing that kind of value-added services to the advertisers, and second is how fast you can disseminate any kind of an information. So whether it's from the government or any other thing. So I think that's where the social media has all this prowess and all this infrastructure ready just to capture. So anything which is going away from this traditional media is going to social media for sure.
Yeah, and it comes with a risk, right? I mean, social media has its own set of challenges that we've spoken a bit about. Misinformation being a big one.
Misinformation plus the kind of policies, as in the social, how will you implement what do you say, the crackdown, or like this. So you can do something to a Republic TV or let's say a traditional media channel, NDTV, etc. But how will you do something like that on Twitter, or how will you crack down on specific people? So again, yeah. So the misrepresentation or misinformation is rampant these days.
And Shali, do you have any thoughts on this? Kind of how content should be regulated or managed?
Not how it should be managed, but how it is being managed right now. For example, with regards to information, different companies like Facebook and Twitter, they have different policies to block nuance. So for Twitter, one new source of problem and the user might be blocked, but the same user could easily propagate through Facebook. So platforms have different policies, and now they have become so huge that they can work independently. Like they cannot work in silos now.
Yeah.
So that is something also that is in the works. I think policy is quite nascent in that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a fascinating conversation, and really looking forward to the piece and how it comes out. I guess I'll kind of end with one last question for you guys. When you think about India as consumers of media and content, I think we've gotten quite used to free content. And if content's free, it means someone else is paying for it, and that's usually advertisers. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that dynamic. Would the equation be different if people are willing to pay for content? Would it be less driven by data, less driven by advertising?
I would say that there are around, right now for OTT, there are around 58 million subscribers, and that subscriber base is growing. So we cannot say that people just like free content. That is obviously the case. YouTube is not going away anywhere, I think, because of all the free content. But having said that, I think right now there is an abundance of content. So people and like companies, startups have also started curating the content for these viewers. So for me, let's say I have XYZ interest. there are startups which can help me curate that content for me, and I am willing to pay for that. So there will obviously be a certain TG who would not be wanting to pay for it, but there would be other ways. So it's not like you just have to pay for watching the content. It could be that by after watching the content, you're buying something. You're buying something from that platform, or for example, Amazon Mini TV. So Amazon has launched a Mini TV where it shows videos for free and gets ad revenue and gets more time on its platform, like on Amazon app. So how the content is being used to monetize, like is the content being used to monetize directly the content only, or some aspect of the larger part of the organization? So there are different models of how this is evolving.
No, and it's really interesting. I mean, to me, the OTT case study as well is a fascinating one. I mean, people were used to getting stuff for free. They were used to downloading pirated movies and content. And then this OTT revolution kind of came in, and behavior is changing, and people are now willing to pay. But I think what people are paying for is really the convenience, right? They're not the convenience of getting content so easily.
Right.
So it's a fascinating. I guess any closing thoughts from you guys?
So one final thing, so I think at least if you talk about just India, so I think the regional content is going to be will be a massive play, whether it's a written content or a recorded content or a live content or a print content. So I think a lot of people are interested. A lot of people are now getting into that. So I think with respect to media, I think the regional play is going to be a massive play. At least that's what I see, at least in the next 4 or 5 years. That can be anything, media or social media, political views, news, education, anything.
Yeah, I mean, definitely quite an exciting time. I'm really looking forward to this piece. It's been a big part of our society, and I love that phrase. It's a mirror into our culture and how we've evolved. So thanks a lot, guys, for this brainstorming session, and look forward to seeing how the piece comes out.